Hello, family. Welcome back to JFK Today, your direct link to all things politics, comedy, and culture. I am your host, Janaya Future Khan, champ yapper and frequent nuisance in the activist and comedy worlds. Let's get dialed in. Right before we hop, I just want to say I am so grateful for the support on Patreon. We're at patreon.com/JanayaFK. This is a self-funded show, but honestly, the greatest gift that we can ever give anyone is time. And I appreciate you. And I definitely need to hear all about your family dinner stories if you're having them. Listen, if you have weird politics at home, don't get upset. Take notes. I got to know. I got to read them out one day. This is going to be great. In fact, facilitate conflict. That's all I'm saying. Have a little fun with it. I need the stories. I need the sauce. Okay. Before we hop into the nitty gritty, we do have some quick hits, but here's what we're going to be talking about. We will be hitting the Hezbollah-Israel ceasefire. We'll talk about these tariffs and what they mean. What is that guy yapping about? Who is going to be taking over for Alito? Because that's something we always got to be paying attention to. And you know how we've been talking about the trans stuff lately? Okay. I'm going to problematize a little bit, but make it very, very funny, okay? This whole, hunter-gatherer story that has shaped all of popular discourse. Because, I'm like, let's go to the source. I got to go to the source. Because, yes, there are differences in the sexes in terms of how things manifest. But I've kind of been this, non-binary thing, and not on purpose, right? Not on purpose. I slipped out non-binary, okay? Just this body of mine, I came out like a slip and slide. That's what I'm shaped like. Just a slip and slide. Because it's a spectrum. Let's just be honest. Isn't a car guy really just a horse girl? Okay. We will be getting into it, but just a couple of quick hits. So the Trump team finally signs a transition agreement. So the White House transition agreement, but they left out some key parts. And those parts really matter, okay? So they're supposed to, do the whole docu-sign situation. We talked about that in another episode. But so they signed some of it, but then they refused to sign the transition agreements that would allow the FBI to conduct security clearances for transition members. So this is according to the New York Times. And the thing that pisses me off is they're doing things exactly how I would do things if I ran the government. If I ran the government, I'd put all my little expert nerd friends who know what they're doing in place. And then the FBI would be like, we got to do a background check. And I would say, I think the fuck not. No, you won't, sir. You will not. This is my homie. They are getting this job. You know what I mean? I would be one of those people. And I'm so mad because the wrong side is doing it. Damn it. Anyway, it makes me so mad. Anytime you see something like this, know for a fact that somebody inside already got hired to do that security stuff. And honestly, it's probably some Israeli spyware company because they have been crushing it lately with their security spyware shit. I mean, we are all compromised at that point, but that's another episode. That's another episode for another day. So they refused to sign that part. And they said, we want to, quote, operate as a self-sufficient organization. Yeah, we could tell, right? We could tell. But here's the thing that really grinds my gears. They are definitely seeing through the Project 2025 agenda. The thing that they said that they weren't going to do, they're definitely doing it. But this is what the Project 2025, this is what they called the FBI, right? They called them a bloated, arrogant, increasingly lawless organization. And it made me so mad because that's what I would say. If you were write it down, how do you feel about this? I'd be like, I might write some shit like that. And now, shit's so ass backwards. I'm like, well, the FBI is in 2010 was the first institution that really named far-right extremism as the greatest domestic threat to this country, thanks to backlash from having a black president. So that's where we're at. I'm just like, here we go. Wrong side talking the right shit. Can't stand it. I can't stand it. Makes me so mad. Anyway, so with this whole, we got the Supreme Court, right? I said we, but I meant them, right? They're bragging. They got the Supreme Court. They got the House. They have Senate, right? They got the presidency. Who is taking Alito's place? That's what I have been very, very curious about. Like, who are the front runners, right? Who's the guy? So I looked into it. It's somebody named, the front runner is a Judge Andrew Oldham. And I was like, okay, what's a major case that he's working on that can give us some indication? So I'm going to tell you about this case right quick. You've got to hear this. It's wild. Okay. So the FDA, that's the FDA versus Wages and White Lion Investment. So it's a vaping case, but the implications are so much bigger than that. I can't believe this is literally what this case is. Like, y'all. Okay. So the FDA has tried to regulate certain flavors of nicotine vapes to stop children from becoming addicted to them, right? So if you have fruit and candy flavors, kids are going to want that because they're fruit and candy flavors, and nicotine, as we know, is highly addictive. We should not have nicotine addicted children running around. Like, leave, like, this, like, you got to grow up and enter the manosphere like a regular boy and take Zyn. That's what you got to do. Put a little blippy in your lippy, you're good to go. But the fruit and candy flavors is too much. It's too much. It is actually too much. So, turns out mostly everybody agrees that that is banning or regulating those flavors is a good thing. So much so that 7 federal appeals courts unanimously rejected legal challenges to the FDA's decision not to authorize those flavors in vapes and e-cigarettes. Only one court, was like, no. We believe, right? We believe in the tobacco companies. And that is how and why this case is going to the Supreme Court. So what is this federal court? Which one is it? Yes, the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. Now, the Fifth Circuit is one of the, Trump just stacked federal judges everywhere. But this one in particular is the most right-wing appeals court in the federal system, right? Like, the most. And who's the guy? Who's the guy who wrote, right, the author of the Fifth Circuit's decision? Andrew Oldham. That's right, the front runner he is the strongest contender for Samuel Alito's replacement. And he is pro candy and fruit flavored nicotine vapes and cigarettes for the children. He is pro that. 7 courts are like, nah, this is wrong. We are going to respect the FDA on this one. And I'm like, God, I'm just become the champion. They're turning me into the champion of all federal programmatics and programming and funding. But when you actually look at it and break it down, you're like, yeah, a lot of this shit there is awesome. It's not all going to where it needs to go. It's not evenly applied. But watching the infrastructure be dismantled while I am a spectator, I think the fuck not. This is going to, this year, take your time, take your notes. Next year is a time for big swings. I'm all the things you are. I'm anxious. I'm like stressed out. I'm like, but I am charged. I'm fired up now. I just watch a little shonen anime and I'm good to go. And you know what? If anime is not your thing, I will be your little anime character. I'll be Natsu for you. I'm fired up now. That is from an anime called Fairy Tail. Yes, it's as gay as it sounds. Okay. Now onto something a little serious, right? What is this ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel? What does it mean? What can we expect? Okay. So right now there is a 60-day ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. It could become permanent. Basically, it stipulates that Israel and Hezbollah are not to attack each other, right? So they can't attack each other. And in those 60 days, Israeli troops must gradually withdraw across the blue line. So that is the internationally recognized border between Israel and Lebanon. And that's over those 60 days. And at the same time, Hezbollah has to move its forces above Lebanon's Litani River. So immediately following that, basically, is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the most lyingest, murderous living MF on the planet, right? Just an absolute, just demonic human being, was like, literally, like just jumps on television and says, if Hezbollah violates the agreement and attempts to rearm, we will strike. If they attempt to rebuild infrastructure along the border, dig a tunnel, launch rockets, or bring in trucks loaded with missiles, we will strike. I'm like, he is the absolute worst. An Arab 100 miles away could sneeze and this nigga would hear Allahu Akbar. Like he is like Hamas is everywhere. Hamas is in the malls. Hamas. They're in the walls. They're in the malls. You know, they're in the calls. Hamas. I can't stand him. But if you're like me, you're wondering, what does this mean for the people of Gaza? What does this mean, right? So for one, people in Beirut and Lebanon have been just bombed, just enduring endless airstrikes, right? So in the time, right, during the 60-day period, UN peacekeeping troops will surge to southern Lebanon as part of the agreement. So they're going to get some assistance. A monitoring body headed by the U.S. will be responsible for ensuring all parties' adherence to the agreement. It's like you can't believe America on any of this because we all know whose lines which party lines, what company lines they toe. American governments use Benjamin Netanyahu talking points. Like it's diabolical. What does this mean for the people of Gaza? There was a point in time, right? Where Hezbollah had tied its ceasefire agreements to a ceasefire in Gaza. So this was Hezbollah and Hamas aligned with Iran and its affiliate groups. They were like, we will agree to a ceasefire if Gaza is included in a ceasefire, right? That was, to my knowledge, and it's not reflected anywhere in the news, in the media, that's not on the table right now. And with winter conditions being what they are, it does get very cold over there. There is no end to the suffering of the people in Gaza in sight at this particular point in time. I'm looking at this moment, right? Because we've seen stalled peace talks or ceasefire talks. Certainly, we haven't reached as far as an arms embargo. So I am looking at this as the ceasefire in Gaza as the logical next step. And I'm hoping that this sets a precedent and that Biden actually wants to do something incredibly useful before he goes. You know, I know that there's some work happening now on solidifying the ERA, but this is something that matters to me a lot. It matters to you. It matters to the people and a lot of the people in this country. We want to see something useful happen for the people of Gaza, and we need to fight for the kind of world where that happens. And it's just tough because we're in this position where we have to wait and see a little bit in terms of what weak points and power mapping we need to do with this government coming in while they dismantle the government. So that's where we're at with that. Before we jump into Trump's tariff plans, I saved this video because with all the shitty judges out there, I came across this video of a court proceeding where a black man is being accused of all these things by police officers, and the judge is just not having it. And I thought, let me just fucking play this right quick, because with all the shitty things coming down at us, right, particularly in the court system, which disproportionately attacks disabled people, disproportionately attacks women, disproportionately attacks people of color, black folks, indigenous folks, sometimes we can forget that there are some good eggs out there. And let me just hit this right quick, because I've been loving it. All right.
Good morning, Mr. McClain. Sir, you're charged with interference with the duties of a public servant. You're facing up to 6 months in jail and/or a $2,000 fine.
Okay, so basically the judge is speaking to this black man. He says, you're facing public interference, charges. Basically, the police officer is saying he could not do his job because of this black man. And so he's either facing 6 months in jail and or possibly a $2,000 fine.
Going to do probable cause. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can or will be used against you. You have the right to have an attorney present. If you cannot afford one will be appointed to you.
Yes, sir. An officer initiated a traffic stop in Harris County, Texas, after observing the defendant exceed a speed limit of 45 miles per hour and make unsafe lane changes. The defendant.
So that's the cop saying that giving the justification for why they made the arrest.
Did not have his driver's license, but told the officer his name and date of birth. While the officer was running the defendant's name, he observed the defendant exit his vehicle, and the officer told the defendant to get back inside the vehicle. And the defendant responded, "Do I have to?" The officer exited the vehicle and attempted to detain the defendant. The defendant tensed up and locked his arms.
For the record, that is a natural physiological response, right? If somebody is grabbing you, even if you want to go limp, that's just straight up science. All of this is sounding really hokey, but I'm watching the judge. What is he going to say?
Everything is conclusory. What has he done wrong? What?
It was the initial lane changes, unsafe lane changes, and the exceeding
Look
the
at him
speed limit that
stuttering.
prompted the stop. And then at that point, he was just attempting to get
Stop.
information.
How exceeding speed limit? How fast was he going? I mean,
I spoke to the officer this morning.
Okay, look how a lady had to step in. She was like, "You are fucking this up." Like, she's stepping in now to defend this cop.
Who told me that he was pacing the defendant at 54 miles per hour.
okay, in a what?
I'm sorry?
In a what? I mean, if it's on 610, he's fine,
Ooh,
right?
ooh.
And then he's interference duties. What is he interfering with? What did he do wrong?
I'm going to be asking that question for what is he interfering with? What is he interfering with?
I think it was after the stop was initiated, the officer was running the plates. The defendant stepped out of his vehicle. The officer told him to get back in the vehicle. The defendant said, "Do I have to?" The officer told me that.
And that's the basis of arrest?
See how it
Yes,
was, Your Honor.
What you
Don't.
saw was
Are you-
him looking shocked. What you saw was the judge being like, "Are we serious here?" And then my little defendant here, he's a black man. He starts to chime in, and listen, a judge is a judge. He was like, "Let me just play it and then break it down."
See how it
Yes,
was, Your Honor.
please.
Don't. Are you losing?
Oh, sir.
Okay.
Sorry, I have been laughing about that as well. So this guy goes, "I want to say something," and the judge is like, "You're not losing. You literally do not need to speak right now. Like, you might ruin this shit." Look at them scrambling. That's the sounds
And
of
Your
people
Honor,
scrambling.
furthermore, as he was attempting to detain him, he locked his arms and tensed up. So as he was attempting to detain him, following that incident of him telling him to get back in the vehicle. And it was
That's
that.
the basis for arrest.
What's the basis for arrest?
It was-
Yes.
It was just a temporary
Walking while black?
detention. He was just
Ooh, he said it. The judge was like, "Walking while black."
attempting to detain him while he was trying to
What's he
investigate.
doing wrong?
He had
What's he doing wrong?
65.
No, I don't think so.
They tried to change.
To find no
how fast he
probable
was going.
cause. No, it's just, he gets out of the car and then it just the virtue of fact, him getting out in the car is interfering with the duties. Really?
Come on. Yeah, he said, "Really? Come
No.
on." Anyway, so he rejects this whole thing, and it just, I want to describe what I'm seeing. Okay. It is a judge in a bow tie and a suit who is just having no nonsense from anybody that day. And I was like, you know what? There are people like that everywhere, all the time. And part of what I want to do on this show and what we need to do together is to find those folks and to champion them. I'm still trying to figure out this judge's name because it's, the actual video itself is very clearly, sourced from an actual real courtroom, but I want to figure out exactly where it came from and exactly who that judge is. But it made me happy because remember how facts are actually a thing that people pretend are not a thing, and that's partly why we feel so nuts all the time. Yeah, because that's where we're at right now. Mm-hmm. Very Daniel Patrick Moynihan moment, right? A quote, "Everyone is entitled to his own opinion, but not to his own facts." Anyway, just right quick, a bit on tariffs. Remember how Trump ran on this whole tariff? He said, "I'm going to lower the cost of groceries. Inflation is the Democrats' fault." You will never have to worry about money again. I'm going to lower the cost of rent. I'm going to lower cost of this. But then he jumps up and is immediately like, quote, on January 20th, as one of my many first executive orders, I will sign all necessary documents to charge Mexico and Canada a 25% tariff on all products coming into the United States and its ridiculous open borders. My guy said on day one. So to be clear, a tariff is a tax or a duty to be paid on a particular class of imports or exports, right? So if you are putting a 25% tariff on all products coming in from Mexico, for example, Mexico has the largest, trade agreement with America. If you're putting a 25% tariff on goods produced in Mexico, good luck. That's not a tariff plan. That's an inflation plan right there. That's exactly what it is. And he's threatening President Claudia Sheinbaum. Right? Remember how everyone was like, America, we're just not, the world's just not ready for a female president or woman president. It's like, it's literally happening everywhere but here. Let's just be really clear about that. So Trump says to her that if your government doesn't stop the flow of migrants and drugs into the U.S. border, this is where we're at. And you know what she said? She lit his ass up. She said, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum said, if even a small percentage of what the United States allocates to war were instead dedicated to building peace and fostering development, it would address the underlying causes of human mobility. You know, the thing that we've been saying on the show the entire time, how it's our foreign policy actually leads to the destabilization in other places in the world. And as a consequence, we have a refugee and migrant crisis that's largely manufactured and blown way out of proportion, right? Criminalize them, do all these things. They're a red herring for all the woes of America. She's 100% right. And one thing that's been hilarious to watch is all the dudes in the manosphere, they all love talking about economy at some point. Some of them know what they're talking about. Most of them don't. But they won't touch this. They'll be like, I think it comes to even little Ben Shapiro, little Ben, he won't even touch this. And he's a guy who yells about these kinds of things all the time. If it was the Democrats who had suggested this, which is, I know, unthinkable, but if it were, they'd be ripping this apart. And I realized something. They actually can't criticize Donald Trump because the zealots would go after them. And I've actually watched it happen once or twice. I mean, even Joe Rogan caught some heat before he came out very pro-Trump because he sometimes has opinions of his own. And some of those opinions manifest themselves in criticisms, sometimes of a beloved man like Donald Trump. I have seen it happen, and they're not touching this with a 10-foot pole. And I'm like, this is wild. Because here's the thing. With these tariffs, and I did my research on this because I can't be trusted with numbers because they don't make sense to me. I get bored. I'm like, what? Where are we going with this? Get to the thing. Is there a decimal? What? That's me. So I was like, what is Goldman Sachs saying about this, right? So I'll get to it, spare you the details, but basically Justin Widener, he's from the Dutch Bank, right? He's an economist. They both agree with Goldman Sachs that it would lead to, you'd see a rise and fall of inflation, right? With these tariffs, right? So inflation would go up and then it would go down. But here's the thing. The level of prices would be permanently higher, right? So that's Widener. That's what he says about that. The level of prices would be permanently higher. Do you know what that means? That means that things are more expensive for everyday people. If you reduce consumer spending, right? Because it A, gets too expensive, or B, you limit options. That's one. Number two, those kinds of tariffs. I mean, Justin Trudeau was sitting there eating his porridge and like fingering his curls and was like, wait, what the fuck? What did that guy say? What did he say? I mean, he's been hanging on by a razor thin margin himself. But that would prompt those kinds of tariffs, right? Would prompt Mexico and Canada to retaliate with tariffs of their own on U.S. shipments to those countries, of which are largely agricultural. That means that you're not going to see economic growth in the way that Trump has suggested that he's going to create economic growth. So these guys yap out of one side of their mouth and move another way, and this is the thing. This is what I really need us to understand. Two things are going to be happening at the same time, and they're not going to be happening cohesively. On one hand, there's going to be an unbelievably high level of competence in certain moments when it comes to, like, say, dismantling certain aspects of the federal government or making sure that they get, the best deals for corporations and billionaires. And in other moments, you're going to see a level of incompetence that is almost incomprehensible, because that's where we're at, because it's just a guy that's hiring a bunch of his billionaire buddies and friends that are getting advice from other billionaire buddies and friends on how to run the fucking one of the biggest countries in the world. That's where we're at. That's where we're at. Or, a superpower or whatever you want to call it. Certainly not, the greatest. I think that ship has sailed. Anyway, real quick as we round out this whole thing, because I've been sitting with this, trans girls in sports, how it's been inflated and massively inflated to be this, like, huge issue that doesn't really exist, where there's legislation, right? There's legislation where there are against trans girls in sport, where there aren't even trans girl athletes, right? In certain states. And I've been looking at that, and the fact that I have made this statement, which is completely true, which is that women are the most understudied, under-resourced, under-researched half population in the world. How do we line those two things up? I like to go back to the origin story. So I found this article from 2023 on Scientific American, where they are talking about how, because so much of this, men are stronger, right? Inherently physically stronger, and therefore superior, and they are the hunters, and women are less physically superior, and they are the gatherers. Now, if you care about strength or nuance or context or, I don't know, words, that how strength is applied. It's the application of strength and not strength itself. That, to me, is the measure, right? That's what Darwin was actually talking about, right? Survival of the fittest, not the person who has the lowest body fat percentage, but whatever creature or being was most suited to win in whatever specific environment they're in. But a lot of this comes from, the man, the hunter, woman, the gatherer thing. And this story has dominated the study of human evolution for nearly half a century. It's pervaded popular culture. It's in museum dioramas. It's in, textbooks, figures. It's in cartoons. It's in feature films. And so I'm reading about this, and it says, and the thing is, it's wrong. That's what this article says. And I was like, oh, I know women wrote this article. And then I look, and it was two women. I was just like, and then I paused for a second, right? Because I was like, look, you say you're a feminist, sir. I'm saying this to myself. I'm like, but, like, would you hire an all-woman moving company? Right? Because it's like, we're full of contradictions no matter how many books you read. And my immediate response to that was, how much time would I have? Like, as in, would I need to move in a couple of hours? Do I have the whole day, as if that would make a difference? And then I was like, and then the other thing that came into my mind at the exact same time was, would I need to know my rising sign? Oh man, it's just, it's so funny. And, like, yes, I taking testosterone. It did make me, physically, my recovery, really, because I was weirdly strong beforehand. My recovery, my stamina was really different for really high intense training, like boxing, for example. But it didn't really change anything on endurance, for example. And if you know anything about trans women in sports right now, it's and I'll focus it in on the college level, right? Because recently there's been a story, transgender athlete, right? Woman, right? Transgender woman on the college level is now being approved to play at the NCAA volleyball tournaments, and that's because other colleges were just like, they petitioned so that she couldn't perform. And this is what's interesting, is that I just find this really interesting. There is no universal rule for the application of trans women and girls in sports. So in volleyball, right, there's certain amounts of metrics that you have to, hit in order to be eligible to play, right? So they're going to be looking at your hormone levels, so they're going to be looking at this and that. But in other sports, it's different. And this is like on the college level alone. And in running and endurance, right? So any kind of track and field sport, it's like there's a almost unilateral ban at the college level at NCAA, right? So I just found this really interesting. I'm like, okay, basically I'm just sitting with these things. But imagine that these folks are positing that the story of the hunter-gatherer thing is wrong. And to me, we could fast forward and see that there's some implications here, because what they're saying is, right, there's no conclusions from this, right? They're not drawing specific conclusions outside of the fact, right, that it bears mentioning that the research, right, of things like exercise physiology, paleoanthropology, archaeology, and ethnography has historically been conducted by men with a focus on men and males. So the article goes on to list some of those things, but what we can conclude from this, right, from this empirical data and its oversights, is that we don't actually know that much about women in sports. Like, we don't know much about female athletic performance or training and nutrition. And I know this because I'm a sports junkie, largely in combat sports. I love sportsing. It's one of my favorite pastimes. But what I do know is that for athletic trainers or coaches, right, they mostly treat female athletes, and I'm using female on purpose because I hate that term generally when it's used colloquially, but this is scientific. They usually just train females as small males. And I'm like, oh, that's me. There I am. I'm represented in this too. And so it means that much of the work we have and we know relies like on our physiological arguments about female athletes, female hunters from back in the day in prehistory is based on research with unbelievably small human sample sizes, right? Or rodent studies. I was like, well, there's Ben Shapiro. See, we're all represented in this, right? And of course, now there's mounting evidence from exercise science. It indicates that women are actually physiologically better suited than men to endurance efforts, right? Such as like running marathons. That obviously would it has implications, I think, on this like prehistory story. But how far that goes or what that means is all hypothetical, right? On the whole early human shit. But there's incels right now in their basements that are just shivering in rage, just furious that somebody might be ruining their alpha male cum story. They're just furious about it. I'm like, bro, if you're still using the language alpha male, you're kind of gay. Like, can we just get there? Like, these are the guys, like alpha male logic is literally like anybody that describes himself as a wife guy is pretty much gay. I think Fuentes said that. Andrew Tate said that. I'm like, right. Okay. So liking your wife, loving a woman is gay. Got it. Just want to make sure we're all up to speed on the latest alpha male rhetoric, right? So, like, I mean, this is not a stretch of the imagination. It just means that the empirical data upon which we place so much of our popular culture and even our scientific understandings is simply not robust enough. And that's what happens when we don't care about half the population of people, right? And the fixation on male superiority, right, is not just in academia, it's in our society at large. I mean, this is how this story became, the big story. It makes me think of like 1967. It's like the year before, between where the Hunter conference came up, and that was where this whole all this big theory was popularized, right? But there was a 20-year-old, right, Catherine Switzer, entered the Boston Marathon under the name KV Switzer, right? Obviously to obscure gender. And there was no official rules against women entering the race, but it just wasn't done at that time. And when officials discovered that Switzer was a woman, race manager Jock Semple attempted to push her physically off the course, right? So it's like in a lot of ways, we don't know anything about women because men don't want to know more about women. That's actually it. And it makes me wonder how much women want to know more about women. because that means that and I think trans people were all included in that. The left should be included. Like, do we want to? Because when I hear women's rights, when I say it, I cringe. That's what internalized misogyny is. I'm just like, oh, it doesn't sound cool. And my job is like, how do we reframe this or twist it around and make it interesting? But that's how misogyny works. And these days, right, the way that we talk about women, it's become so corporatized. It's like girl boss bullshit, and I can't really relate to what's happening right now around it. I'm like, I feel that way, honestly, about a lot of the race rhetoric that goes on. Anyway, I don't want to yap too much, but just to say that we got some biased assumptions that persist in scientific literature and public consciousness, and we just don't know enough yet. And we need to expand that out. Anyway, it's a good article. Go ahead and check it out. Use incognito if you don't want to subscribe. I get around some of them because I have so many subscriptions. I can't keep up with them. Anyway, just me thinking and figuring out how to actually fill out the formula so that when we present the solution, which trans women are women, we actually can demonstrate how the fuck we got there, because that's what we got to do in order to change shit as it is. But anyway, that's just me yapping your ears off, because it's one of my favorite things to do. Seems like about time to hit the VMs for that voicemail of the day. What do we got?
Hello, Janaya. Listening to your episode about Walmart and DEI programs, and it has me thinking, do you think that these organizations that are cutting their DEI program at the end of the day just realize they're always going to be racist? Like, they spent all this money, did all this work for an initiative, and they go, oh shoot, we're still going to be racist at the end of the day. So why continue with this? Like, that's what I think, especially Walmart.
I feel this. And look, like, I know that for some people, they're just like, visibility matters so much and it means something, right? I don't want to take away from the emotional thing, right? Of having, like a pride set up or something, in a Target or in a Walmart, or, having them have like black power colors or whatever, RBG, you know what I mean? Like, but they don't exist for that reason, right? Corporations exist to sell products. And I think when consumers indicate that this is something important to them, they're just going to follow that trend. So they're not designed to care. Now, do I think that there are people inside of corporations that give a damn? Certainly, because we are everywhere, right? Like, people who care are everywhere. There's always pockets of resistance. But, you always have to look at why something was created in the first place and what it means. So rather than fight for representation, which I think we're all seeing the limits of, and like fully, completely, I'm like, no, we got to just stick to the belief systems and the values. Like, I care about, I care about Black people having long life, having access to healthcare, right? Argue the same thing with trans people. I care about that more than I care about having a pop-up with the pastel transgender flag. I mean, I didn't even get to vote on that, right? I don't even know how I feel about that flag. I don't like it. I don't like the pride flag either, but I couldn't come up with a better one. So we just got to live in that hideous monstrosity of color. I want to make a petition where the pride flag is really now about belts, and you got to compete. I will figure out what the competitions are, but maybe the entry level is like, you got to read The Ethical Slut and like Gender Outlaws or something in the new Jim Crow in order to become a yellow belt. Black belt could still be top tier. You know what I mean? Anyway, but yeah, they don't get, all I want to say is that they don't really care about us. And they don't, and they never will. They're going to follow the trends. But what they are good indicators of is like the limits of how much people can care about a thing as a collective. We only ever need a small population of people that incites really big change, just a small dedicated few. And that's all that's ever, really needed. But you generally need large swaths of people so that you can find those couple of champions. And I'm like, this is about creating a new brain trust, because these hoes can't be trusted. That's it. They just cannot be trusted. They will go where the trends are. And they are afraid of right-wing pushback. And that's what I'm noticing across the board. Like, even Disney was like, oh, yeah, let's like maybe that character was a little gay. I'm like, you were putting gay characters on before you even were honest about that shit. Every villain in early Disney's everything, well, they were definitely queer coded. Come on. Also very attractive and extremely compelling characters. I mean, even Wicked, right? That's a story about Black Revolution. Are you kidding me? That's a story. That is an anti-fascist story. And yeah, the girl made some mistakes with the winged monkeys and shit, but they had a problem with her skin color and they had a problem with animals talking because they were like, this is regressive. And Oz was really a shitbag that came from our world and imposed their shitty politics on a world with magic. That's it. And because he didn't have magic, he was like, I got to figure out a way to take it. Oh my God, I just went on a rant about Wicked because I read Gregory Maguire's book. And I also am low-key obsessed with musicals. And I haven't seen the film yet, but I have seen the musical. And I know all the songs off by heart. I know all the songs off by heart. Anyway, if you are a Wicked person, we have a lot in common. I just want to say that. But I love this question. And we definitely have our work cut out for us because, again, DEI and that whole commitment was a trend. But it meant that shows how far we can go when we're focused on something. But if we could apply that and not put it in the hands of the corporations, right, to take action, but keep the power in our hands, right? I think we're unstoppable. And that feels like a pretty good place to roll this out. But I love the question. Thank you so much. And it seems about time to hit that outro music. Just want to say thank you so much for listening to JFK Today. It means the world to me. The show really is a labor of love. New episodes drop 4 times a week. We're available everywhere podcasts are. Don't forget, go ahead and subscribe or leave us a review on Apple or Spotify. That shit definitely counts. It means something. Ooh. And don't forget to drop your voice note questions to jfktodayShow@gmail.com because I want to hear from you. Shout out to KR, Carolyn, and shout out to you, the listeners, that make it all possible. Love you. Peace.